Hello, Views&Thrus here, and today we're going to be talking about a group of Decepticons known as the Seekers. To specifically say, the classic iteration of the Seekers. And to get into what the Seekers are, they're a bunch of Decepticons that share the same body type. Like, for example, take here, Starscream. He's in a gray-red palette. But then they also released Blue Starscream, also known as Thundercracker, and even Black Starscream, also known as Skywarp. And so this essentially is what the Seekers boil down to. Just a bunch of Decepticons that are all the same body type, and that they're used quite heavily within the fiction to even show like generic Decepticons. So like you'll have like essentially an army of generic Seekers that never got toys. But these are the holy trinity of the Seekers. They were the originals. More onto these two later. Now, Starscream. Here we have classic Starscream in a nice F-15 mode. And you can kind of think of him as the main Seeker, because he got the most personality out of them. He was the second commander of the Decepticons, and he really is in every Transformer series, or there is a Starscream-like character. And thus, since there's so many Starscreams, and Seekers are just kind of repaints of Starscream, i.e. color swaps of Starscream, there are a lot of different Seekers in a lot of different Transformers series. And so this is just going over the transformation real quick. It's not that hard, not that important, also at the same time. And here we have Starscream in robot mode. Except with that not put up right. There we go. Starscream in robot mode. And there are a few key things that are very identifiably Seeker about him that usually most Seekers will have, despite in different Transformer series, which are like the wings on the back, the null rays on the arm. Usually they'll have a high intake if they're very accurate, and they'll also have a cockpit on the chest. Here we have Skywarp, who is a black repaint of Starscream. Very nice orange color on the cockpit, right? By the way, really like that. And the only real interesting thing about him, like they all have their personalities, but outside of Starscream, they're all fairly generic personality-wise. His unique trait is that he can teleport, thus Skywarp. And we also have the Blue Thundercracker. And he is essentially just a blue Starscream. Very much the same. Nothing of note too different from Starscream in general. Color or design-wise, because they're exactly the same, thus being a Seeker. His unique trait was that he was voiced by that one guy in the Flintstones. Yeah, that guy. Anywho. I did mention that all the Decepticon ranks and generics could easily be filled by Seekers. So when you're done the main three Seekers, these three, what do? Because you need to make more toys. Why? Make the generic ones. This one specifically coming from a scene where they needed to make acid rain, so they sent 3 Seekers to deal with that and make the said rain. And they came in a green color, a yellow color, and a blue color. And this is Acid Storm, an amalgamation of generic Decepticon Seeker. And it's actually kind of amazing that they made him, because they're really stretching on what they can do with the Seekers. And it got to the point where like this is fairly loose and doesn't click in, and the mold's really starting to degrade. But since you did the main 3 Seekers, and then this generic Seeker, what are you to do? Well, you just make a new Starscream. And this Starscream is a very different coloration to the Starscream we saw before. He is very much whiter. He is based on the cartoon coloring, and so he has very like block colors, not a lot of detail within the color. And they just actually did release a second version of Starscream because they needed to make more Seekers because they're just so popular to make Seekers. But there are a group of Seekers that I haven't mentioned yet. And they're fairly different from the normal Seeker. But let's just look at back in the 80s on the Seeker toy. What could they really change to differentiate against different Seekers? Because they got tired after releasing the same 3 Seekers back in the 80s. They wanted to give people more incentive to buy new toys. And so what they did was they took the wings and changed them. They took the weapons and changed them. And they changed a key part of the transformation. And I'll show you exactly the transformation. This is a junky old G1 Starscream. And the change to the transformation is very, very simple. For you see the second series of Seekers right here in Ramjet. He encapsulates it fairly well in that he has the new items and he clearly has the new wings. Compare him to Starscream back here, and you can see, like, this is fairly different. Like, despite being the same main body, he does look very different from Starscream, which is very nice. I enjoy that. And we'll transform him real quick even. He has the same transformation as Starscream, as you might imagine, with just a few extra bits due to the extra wings. And the second series of Seekers, they came out in the second season of Transformers. And they have a very key noticeable difference between, other than the wings and such. And you might be able to notice it right now. In that they are the cone heads. They are cone-headed Seekers. And here is Ramjet in robot mode. And I think I do prefer the Conehead Seeker of the classic Seekers because I think the Conehead just really brings out a lot of personality within them. And Ramjet has 2 friends to bring in. Ramjet's quirk being that he likes to ram things head on because he's that kind of guy. And we have his friend Dirge, another Conehead, who has sort of a double wing thing going on, where he has 2 wings on each side. And he is another blue Seeker. He has a lot more black in him than Thundercracker, so it kind of differentiates. He also has the yellow on the wings, and he's a Conehead, which makes him very much different from Thundercracker. Also not voiced by that guy in the Flintstones, another key difference from Thundercracker. But his main trait is that he would actually just die a lot. He would show up, die, and then show up again because they forgot they killed him. Anywho. And my favorite Seeker, because he is red, is Thrust. The last of the Coneheads, and he even has, if you can see here, VTOLs onto his wings, and so he could hover in air. Despite never really doing that a lot in the show. He could do that, and the other Seekers couldn't. And they just had to live with that. His unique trait is that he is completely generic and has nothing special about him, really. And he also is like one of the nicer Seekers because inside here is chromed, and so it's like really shiny. It really comes out really well, his cockpit. And it's just a really nice quality in Seeker. Blur. And it took me 5 years to collect all of these Seekers. It took Hasbro 5 years to release all the Seekers for me to finally collect. And you know the real kicker? I don't even like this mold. The classic Seeker mold is very much dated at this point. It lacks articulation that it desperately needs. It needs a swivel on this arm, and yet it doesn't have said swivel. It's frustrating. And it has a swivel down here, but it's below the knee, and it's useless. And so it's a highly dated mold. And with the guns on, the wings just get in the way of the articulation, and it's just frustrating. And I really want Starscream and the rest of the Seekers to get a new update in the Classics line, but at the same time, I don't want to collect them again. It'll be another 5 years before I can bring you Classics 2.0, even though that kind of technically happened. Starscream, the Classics 2.0. Not the... Well, there's that, and... Oh, there's too many Seekers, god damn it! You can do that, and that's really nice that Marvel kept in that functionality, because why not? I think it's silly, but, you know, it's